If you're going to be a software engineer, work in the industry, then you're going to have to know what are data structures. Data structures are important because they are the foundation of computer science. We use data structures to store, to manage, and to allow us to be able to organize our data in applications that we write to solve problems. Because they are foundational, the one thing that we have to realize is that no matter if we're writing a desktop application, a website application, or even a mobile app, no matter what type of application you're writing, we have to know that it's some way, somewhere down the line, behind the application, the solution that you created, you're going to use some type of data structure. In this video today, we're going to look at a queue and why it's so important and useful in software engineering. Okay, Professor, I've been doing some research online and I see that there is something called a queue that's a data structure. Can you explain what that is? So a queue is a data structure that is linear, that follows a principle called FIFO. Okay, Professor, what does FIFO mean? Can you explain that? That is a very good question. FIFO means first in, first out. What that simply means is that the very first element or data that's entered into the queue is going to be the first one that is removed. You can think of it as a line inside of your favorite coffee shop. The very first person that puts in their order, they should, in theory, be the very first person to receive their order. Everyone behind them, they should receive their order in sequence. You can see how this could be very, very useful from a programming perspective to make sure that you keep things in a sequential order and to make sure that everything is done in a very timely manner. Okay, so let's look at some code here. When we look at the very first line, what this is doing is essentially it imports dequeue, which is short for a double-ended queue. This is in the Python language, and what dequeue is a very flexible and is efficient data structure object that allows us to be able to pin and pop from both ends of the queue. All right, so it is often used within Python to implement both queues and stacks. All right, we look at the second line. Basically what we're doing is we are creating or initializing a empty dequeue that we are naming queue. All right, and we go on and we look at line 4 and 5, and this is what we see here. Okay, so in lines 4 and 5, in lines 4, what we're doing, we're adding the value of a to the right end of the queue, the right end of the queue. All right, this is essentially enqueuing or adding an item to the queue. Then we go on, we look at line number 5, and we see that we are adding the item B to the queue. All right, so now we added A, we added B, we essentially have a queue that looks like this. So I've added these data to this queue. How do I get the data back? That too is another very good question. So if we go back to our code, we see that we use the append functions to add or enqueue items to the queue. If we go down and we have the queue.popLeft function, what that does is dequeue or removes the first item from the queue that we added, which in this case would be A. If we go back and look at the very last line, we say print Q, which is going to only return B because that was the very last item in the queue. Remember, we use first in, first out type of structure with a queue. Are there different types of queues, or just one type of queue in general? That is a good question. Yeah, there are different types of queues. You have simple queues that use the basic first in, first out structure that we've already talked about. You have circular queues that essentially kind of connects the end of the queue to the front of the queue. You have priority queues that elements are dequeued or removed from the queue based on a priority, not just from a sequential perspective. You have dequeue, which is basically a double-ended queue that allows you to be able to insert and delete data inside of the queue from both sides. So hopefully this video has been helpful and you have a better understanding how you can use the data structure called a queue. Very simply, a very simple queue. Thinking about it from in its basic form, it uses a first in, first out type of architecture. It's linear in nature, very sequential, and it's definitely something that you can and should keep in the forefront of your mind as you are working as a software engineer. So remember, when dealing with queues, they use a first in, first out approach. So you may ask yourself, what if I want to remove the last element from the queue instead of the first? Well, that's a good question, but when you're dealing with the queues, that's generally not the method of operation that you would take, because queues work on a first in, first out principle. And so if you want to do that, then you would probably need to use another data structure, such as maybe a list or something like that. There are many other data structures out there that we're going to talk about within this series, talking about data structures. But today we focus on the queue, and hopefully you have a better understanding how you can use it and why it is useful. As always, please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video. Blessings.